Why is the United States once again bombing Syria? It seems like it's one of their favorite pastimes, placing warships right on their doorstep in the Middle East. And is the United States actively trying to assassinate President of Syria, Bashar al-Assad? It sure seems that way. Syrian journalist Kevork Almassian, who of course covers geopolitics and does an amazing job at Syr1a analysis. Kevork, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Clayton. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So let's talk about the Assad piece in a second, the assassination plot against Assad. But first, obviously over the past 24 hours, additional bombings we've seen on Syrian targets, resistance fighters firing back against those attacks against United States positions. What do we know about those latest attacks?
First of all, we know the claim from the Pentagon that F-15s and F-16s probably participated in bombing what is called Al-Bu Kamal border crossing. And Al-Bu Kamal border crossing is essential for Syria because the United States occupies what is called Al-Tanaf border crossing. The United States has forces on the borders between Jordan and Iraq. They're blocking Syria's trade routes between these countries and also the connectivity between Tehran, Baghdad, and Damascus. Therefore, the Syrians, after liberating the deserts from ISIS with the help of the Russians and the Iranians, they opened a new border crossing in Al-Bu Kamal. And this Bu Kamal is the only route now that Syria can do business with its neighboring countries, and especially on the eastern side, and also having this Iranian leverage in the region. So the Americans want to hit this border crossing in order to block any access of Iran to this connectivity, as I mentioned, of this alliance between Baghdad, Tehran, and Damascus, and also Beirut. This is essential life-saving route for the Syrians, so they protect it. But the Pentagon says that they are bombing what is called quote Iranian-backed militias. Those are not Iranian militias; they are Syrians, and they fight under the Syrian army formations. And the Syrian.
But the New York Times today, Kevork. So then you're disagreeing with the front page of the New York Times today, which, as you know, is a bastion of journalism. And really, we hold it up as the greatest newspaper in the world. And of course, the New York Times today says that these are Iranian, literally in their headline, Iranian-backed proxies. So these are all Iranian. They're clearly trying to tie this to Iran. So you disagree with the New York Times, Kevork. This is shocking news.
It's like calling for example, the Israeli army a CIA-backed militia, or calling the Israeli army a Pentagon-backed army. It's the same. Syria is supported by Russia, is supported by Iran. Syria buys weapons from Iran and Russia, and it gets also support, political and military support from them. So the justification that those are Iranian-linked or Iranian-backed militias, first of all, under international law, it doesn't give any justification for the Americans to bomb Syria to begin with. Secondly, these forces who were bombed are Syrian forces, and if you want to say they are backed by Iran, this is a political cover for bombing Syria. But on a legal base, if you want to speak legally, Syria has invited Russian forces to come. And also there is a strategic military alliance between Syria and Iran. So Iranians have advisors in Damascus, but they don't have combat forces in Syria. No, zero. The Iranians never sent fighting combat forces underground in Syria. They had their advisors and also military and intelligence support. All this bombing that happened there against Syrian forces and Al-Bu Kamal border crossing, as I mentioned, it's a message to Syria, to Iran, and to the regional countries that if this war expands, the Gaza war expands, and if Hezbollah intervenes in this conflict, which seems to be coming closer and closer as we speak, because of the carpet bombing of the Gaza Strip and the clear plan of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to the Sinai, it seems that Hezbollah will intervene soon in this conflict. If that happens, the Israeli side doesn't have the same combat readiness and experience as Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been fighting in Syria for 12 years, and they have sophisticated weaponry, unlike Hamas. Therefore, Americans will also intervene if that happens. If Americans intervene, what they're going to do is, if you check the map, because they have a military site in a Tanaf border crossing, they will try to seal all the borders between Syria and Iraq so that there would be no access of Syria to Iraq and to Iran anymore. So this is the plan. But on the other side, the allies of Syria, they have sent a very clear message to the Americans by bombing the illegal occupation bases in Syria and in Iraq. Let's remember the Iraqi parliament voted and asked for the American forces to leave the country, and they said no,
Right.
we're not
In fact,
leaving the country.
not only no will we not leave, we're also going to build a second military base on oil fields. So we're not going to
Yes.
leave, even though you want us out of your country. We're going to build a second base on your oil
Yeah.
fields.
And in Syria, the presence of the American forces is illegal, again, under international law. They are there since 2017, 2018 to occupy the oil fields, to disallow the Syrian government of using the revenues of the oil to reconstruct the country. This is the main purpose of the... So basically, the forces who are in Syria are acting as pirates on Syrian territory. So any act of violence using force against American forces is permissible under international law. I'm a Syrian, and I don't any American to die in the course of this conflict. I want all the Americans to be in the United States unharmed and untouched. But if you come to my house and you are stealing my water and my oil, and if I use violence against you to kick you out of my home, then you have to ask the question, why am I at the first place in your home? This is the question that nobody asks. Look, Fox News never mentioned it. CNN, MSNBC, no one mentioned the fact that those forces in Syria to begin with are illegal under international law. Therefore, the use of force against them is permissible, but they don't give you this context. Otherwise, the people will start asking questions. What are we doing in Syria?
Right, right. Members of Congress have started asking that question. Matt Gaetz, among others, why are we in Syria? And it's been voted down, so the United States will continue to occupy Syria. I do want to ask you before we talk about Assad, specifically about the Golan Heights. And of course, if Hezbollah intervenes in the north, what will Syria do with the Golan Heights? And of course, pushing out 2.3 million Palestinians into Egypt. As Scott Ritter just told us moments ago on the show, that would be a war crime, and Egypt will not tolerate that. And if Israel wants to get into a fight with Egypt, they will lose. So a lot of moving pieces right now. But take the Golan Heights piece. What does Syria do there?
Actually, there are sequences that we have to follow. If this conflict expands, the first thing we are going to see is Hezbollah intervention in two ways. One, we will see precision missiles being fired from the Hezbollah side against the settlements and against the military and installations, intelligence installations in Israel. The second thing, we will see ground incursion into the Israel. And as Scott Ritter said multiple times, by the way, he said that if Hezbollah wages such a ground offensive against northern Israel, if you compare it with Hamas, it will look like from a children playbook, because Hezbollah is very disciplined and very competent force. People forget the fact that Hezbollah is not only a political party anymore. They have over 100,000 soldiers. They believe in a doctrine, in a religion, and they also have a very long combat experience, unlike the Israelis. Last time Israelis fought was in 2006, and at the same time, the Hezbollah, they have air defense systems, they have anti-tank rockets, they have precision missiles, and also Yahond missiles. Yahond is only Syria has the Yahond missiles in the region. Yahond are the anti-ship cruise missiles. Those are very serious weapons. Therefore, we see all these American special forces going to Israel, and also from Germany. They are stationed in Cyprus. These are all indications that Israel cannot defend itself alone. Israel needs its allies if this war expands. Second, from the Syrian side, if the Hezbollah intervention happens, I believe that there will be rockets being fired also from the Syrian side, and then the Israelis will come and bomb Damascus. They will try to eliminate the strategic power of Assad in Damascus, and they have told this to the French. Yaddawat Ahranot reported this, that the French delivered this message to Hezbollah, that if you intervene in this conflict, Israelis will assassinate Assad. So we will see there are two units, combat units ready from the Syrian side. They have been getting prepared since 2018 when Syria liberated these areas on the borders with Israel. Because remember, before 2018, for 3 to 4 years, the border between Israel and Syria was occupied by ISIS and by Al-Nusra Front. Both are Al-Qaeda offshoots. And there was not a single bullet being fired from Al-Qaeda or ISIS against Israel. In fact, the Israeli hospitals were full of the injured soldiers from Al Qaeda and from ISIS. And even the former head of the Mossad, he was on Al Jazeera. He confessed and he said that they have given medical treatment to Al Qaeda fighters in the Israeli hospitals because for them this was a humanitarian thing to do back then. But we all know that wasn't the case. They wanted to use these forces against their mutual enemy back then. But when these territories were liberated, the Syrian side, with the collaboration and coordination with Iran and Hezbollah, they have formed new units, and those are called the Golan Liberation Units. And those are two units, in my opinion. They will be engaged in ground offensive into the Golan Heights, which belongs to the Syrians according to every UN Security Council resolution, in order to try to liberate it. I think the players in the region, they can see clearly that the United States is not in its peak of its power, and it's been involved heavily in the Ukraine war. They believe that this is an opportunity, probably also, to bring the United States into another costly war, which you can see that the Americans are printing hell of a money in order to sustain these two big wars in Ukraine and in Israel. And this is not in the interest of the Americans now to get involved in a big conflict, but the Israelis, they are definitely dragging the Americans into bigger conflict instead of calling for ceasefire, for example, in the Gaza Strip. Today, Hillary Clinton said his ceasefire is equivalent of helping Hamas. You're giving a service to Hamas if you call for a ceasefire, because the goal is quite clear. Ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, 2.2 million people to Sinai, and they're trying to bribe Egypt, telling them we can pay you $5 billion, $8 billion, $20 billion to house these people permanently. And this is just the second Nakba. I mean, 48 was clear that all these Palestinians who became refugees, this was the same way that they became refugees 70 years ago.
Let's talk about Assad. Let's talk about, you've been covering this on your show, which is the growing plot to assassinate President Bashar al-Assad. Can you talk about what you see in terms of reports about this and how this would unfold?
Yeah. First of all, I read this report, intelligence report, on Yediot Ahranot, and it was translated to English. I was astonished that the Israelis are threatening Assad with assassination if Hezbollah intervenes in this conflict. So I started asking my contacts in Damascus, and they told me that they are very alarmed by these reports, and they take it very seriously, because there is a precedent of killing presidents and leaders in the region. They have killed Saddam Hussein in the most heinous way. You agree with him or not, that's a different thing, but it was a killing of a leader of a country. There is the incident of killing Gaddafi again by the NATO proxies. So they tried to kill Assad for 12 years. When ISIS was expanding and they were knocking the door of Damascus, John Kerry told the so-called Syrian opposition figures in a private meeting, and this was recorded and leaked by WikiLeaks, that they were watching the expansion of ISIS and they found it convenient for them because they wanted to pressure Assad. If ISIS managed to break into Damascus and the rockets of ISIS were falling around the presidential palace of Syria, what would have happened to Assad? You think they would have killed him, right? So they wanted for Assad to die in the past 12 years. So and now when the pro-Syria alliance emerged victorious, I do not rule out the possibility at all that they would try to kill Assad this time directly instead of trying to do it through the proxies. And a very good colleague of mine has very good contacts in the United States, in State Department, and also in the CIA. He was also asking around, and they told him clearly, like 2 months ago, since 2 months, they're thinking of getting rid of Assad and finishing the unfinished business in Syria once and for all, because they believe that the regime change war that has failed, and they thought that they can later pressure Assad through the sanctions. It's not working. And the Chinese are now striking deals with Assad. There is now a strategic partnership between China and Syria, and Syria will be on the Silk Road Initiative road. So they want to stop this. They don't want for Syria to emerge victorious and to reconstruct. So the other thing that I mentioned, the report of Yediot Ahranot, the former MI6 agent Alistair Cook, he also mentioned the same information exactly, and he said that he is highly alarmed, and this is very worrying for him that the Israelis are thinking in this way. And unfortunately, I'm saying, in the current mentality that is governing Israel, and from the statements that we see and we hear every day, what they're speaking about the Palestinians and what they are planning for the Palestinians, It's clear-cut psychopathy, in my opinion, and I do believe that they would not hesitate to assassinate Assad if the opportunity rises for them.
Yeah, they've been, like you said, they've been trying to do it for years and have failed. And of course, over the past few weeks, you've seen a number of news reports saying that Assad has won in Syria. I saw an Al Jazeera piece on this. I saw Axios. I saw other saying, now that Assad has finally won Syria. He's made these partnerships. That this is a clear indication that Assad has overcome these assassination attempts and everything that the West has kind of thrown at them. And I don't think they like that. I don't think they like these headlines showing that Assad has beaten them.
Actually, they are very aggressive in their approach toward Assad, and there is always an appetite for war. Right. In Washington, D.C., there is always appetite for war because the economy is based on war, and they make profits when there is war. And also, they are very arrogant in a way that they don't accept defeat. And the examples in the past in Iraq and how they killed Saddam and Gaddafi. And when a president like Syria, a smaller country than in Libya and in Iraq, with the help of his allies, he survived. This is for them humiliating. And we can see that the shift started to happen after the Syrian war in the balance of power. We started to see that Russia has become more emboldened, for example, to wage its special military offensive against Ukraine, because the Russians also gained their combat experience in Syria. They have tried their weaponry, they have tried their air force, and they have seen that the proxies of the United States are not invincible, and they can defeat them. And this was also emboldened Russia into going into Ukraine. And now we can see that this is a gradual change in the balance of power, and Syria played an essential role in it. So before the next elections in 2024, in my opinion, especially after the failed counteroffensive in Ukraine, which is another slap in the face of the establishment in the US, huge failure, tens of billions of dollars poured into Ukraine to just break through the first or the second defensive lines, and they couldn't do it. So they can't swallow these defeats, and in my opinion, they will try to achieve strategic victory in the Middle East before the next elections. Otherwise, in my opinion, after the next elections, we will see that the American power and the ability to project its power around the world will diminish, and they have to accept then the fact that they are not alone in the international system. If they achieve a victory in Syria, they may pretend that they can prolong the life of the empire. But if they can't do it now also in Palestine and in Syria, I think we are going to see the multipolar world in a shorter time than expected.
I think you're right about that. Kevork Almassian, always great to see you. His website, of course, his YouTube channel is Syr1a Analysis. I encourage all of you to subscribe to it, follow him on Telegram as well. Always very insightful on all of these issues. Kevork, great to see you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clayton. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.